All right, we're going to let everybody kind of get in here, give them just a minute here, and we'll get talking about the next couple of days here as far as severe weather is concerned. Here, let me turn, get some feedback here for just a second. Okay, there we go. So, give everybody another 30 seconds or so here, and we'll get to it here. Well, first off, we'll just take a look at the current observations, current radar across the central portions of the United States, and you can see that really not really too much going on. There's some thunderstorms up into southern Minnesota. Look at the snowfall up into the Dakotas, where they're going to get some heavy snowfall up there. But really, overall, right now, there's not a whole lot going on just yet, and it's going to be later on this afternoon before we do start to see a better potential for severe weather. So heading over, let's take a look here. This is the Storm Prediction Center outlook for today. You can see that there is a moderate risk of severe weather out across kind of western and northwestern portions of Iowa for Sioux City, Ames, Mason City, Fort Dodge, those areas. And so there's the moderate risk there. The enhanced risk kind of surrounds that, extends into southern Minnesota, and then back down across eastern Nebraska, out into Iowa, northwestern Missouri. Eastern Kansas also have an enhanced risk down into portions of Texas, closer to Dallas. And then a pretty large slight risk area that is in place across a large chunk of the eastern plains out into like the Ozarks and up into the Missouri Valley in the Midwest region. And if we take a look at some of the probabilities for today, hail probability, greatest probability here into northwestern portions of Iowa, and then also down here just south of there and then down into Texas. These areas with the dash line, that is a significant threat of hail, so that means there could be some large hail in those locations. And then if we take a look at the wind threat, again, greatest up here into Iowa today, a 30% risk down into Texas as well, that 45% risk, some being significant into Iowa there with the wind. And then of course the tornado risk is greatest up into northwestern Iowa, where there's a 15% risk of tornadoes there. Some of these tornadoes could be large, long track, strong tornadoes. That's definitely not out of the question with the kind of setup that we're seeing today into that moderate risk area. The big question will be, there's a good environment even as you work south of there, as you start to work down into portions of Kansas and Oklahoma as well. But there's a lot of warm layer aloft, and it's forming an inversion or a cap on the atmosphere, kind of a lid. And so the question is, you start to work south out of the moderate and enhanced risk areas, become, okay, can the environment overcome the cap? And I think that's going to be a big question for those places down into Kansas and Oklahoma today. Will be if that can occur. If we move into day two, this is the latest day two outlook that was released about 35 minutes ago, and you can see there's an enhanced risk across a large chunk of the Mississippi River Valley, all the way from northern or northeastern Louisiana, western, northwestern Mississippi, eastern Arkansas, down into southeastern Missouri, western Tennessee, western Kentucky, southern Illinois, and southwestern Indiana. You have an enhanced risk that extends that, and that goes up towards, kind of like Indianapolis, back up in towards, the Valparaiso area, back out towards Kankakee, down towards St. Louis, Quincy, Bloomington, and then extending down into portions of the Mississippi and Ohio River Valleys, Tennessee River Valley, some of those locations across the region there. And if we take a look here for tomorrow, hail risk not quite as significant tomorrow as what it's going to be today. You can see a 15% risk of hail tomorrow. Significant hail possible from basically down into the Mississippi Valley. The wind threat for us across the Ohio Valley, if you're watching out of the Ohio Valley, is going to be the primary threat tomorrow, especially as you start to work into southwestern Indiana and southern Illinois. That looks like where there's a bit more confidence with the wind, just because it looks like that's probably going to be the best probability of having more instability. We're going to have a lot of wind shear aloft tomorrow. That's not going to be a question. The instability is going to be a question, and that's something we've talked about for some time. If we take a look at the tornado probabilities tomorrow, there is a 10% tornado risk all the way up into places like Indianapolis, St. Louis, back out towards like Urbana-Champaign, back down towards Springfield, St. Louis, and then obviously stretching down into places like Little Rock, Memphis, Bowling Green, and then there's a 15% risk already tomorrow down into portions of Mississippi, Arkansas, and northern portions of Louisiana. And you can see again, there's those dashed lines. So there is the possibility of a more significant tornado in those dashed lines, which is pretty much the entire 10% area. Just because we have such strong wind shear tomorrow, you have to include that threat of tornadoes. Even if our storms are severe threats, a more linear threat, the tornado threat would be more significant tomorrow if we see discrete cells ahead of this line. Right now, confidence in that is somewhat low. So let's go on over and let's take a look at what's going on out across the Midwest right now. Like I said, there's not a whole lot going on. If we take a look at the current radar, you can see the only thunderstorms ongoing are up here into southern portions of Minnesota and extreme northern portions of Iowa, and those are not warned. There are no watches or warnings out currently. Let me make sure that's correct. Yeah. And I don't think there's any mesoscale discussions either. There are not. So that's kind of, there's not a whole lot going on right now, but the environment's becoming pretty primed here. If we take a look at the current dew points across the area, you can see there's some pretty good dew points starting to come up ahead of the area of low pressure back out here into southeastern portions of Nebraska. Eventually, these are going to advect and kind of translate off to the north and northeast. And these dew points are going to spread this afternoon up into Iowa, and you're going to end up setting up with kind of a triple point situation where you have a warm front and a low pressure system and a dry line coming on through. And you can see the dry line really well out here. I mean, you can see where dew points are dropping off to 64, 62 degrees, and then pretty quickly we're dropping off. Looking at one of the surface pressure or the surface observation I printed out here, you're dropping off pretty quickly from like 60 degrees in central Kansas to 44 degrees a couple counties to the west out here. So it's a really impressive dry line, a very strong dry line out to the west today, and that's going to be the focal point of thunderstorm development as we head on into the afternoon hours. If we take a look at the current satellite, the current visible satellite, you can see there's a lot of clearing out here into the central plains. We still have some clouds out into portions of Iowa. But we are seeing some clearing taking place, and into the next couple of hours, we're going to continue to see some of that clearing taking place out here into Iowa. One interesting thing to note here, and it maybe, I don't know how hard it is or isn't for you to see, but you can kind of see some of these convective rolls kind of forming out here into Missouri and even up into Iowa as well. And that is indicating the presence of some instability across the area, and you're going to start to see probably more cumulus form. You'll start to see what looks to be a little bit more of a cumulus field already forming out here into portions of western Missouri and eastern portions of Kansas. So overall today, here's the current look at instability out there. There's a lot of instability. ML Cape values upwards of 3,000 joules per kilogram out across portions of Kansas. You can really see where the warm front is. So you've got a warm front up here, you've got a dry line back out here, and all this warm, moist, unstable air sitting across it. Like I said, the big question is going to be, will that cap break down into portions of Kansas and Oklahoma today to support severe weather there? So let's go on over, let's take a look. First thing we're going to start out looking at is just the composite reflectivity today, and this does have updraft helicity included with it. So this is as we work on into the afternoon, and we're going to keep things in central time for today, if I can convert that over. I'm used to dealing with Eastern. So this is 4 going into 5 o'clock. You can still see there's not a whole lot going on, maybe a couple thunderstorms up into very southern portions of South Dakota. But those at this point would probably be near just north of the warm front. So those would probably be large hail makers. And then as we start to work further on into the evening here, as we start to work towards 6 and then getting into like 7 o'clock, notice out here into Iowa, the cap breaks, and now we have thunderstorms developing into kind of northwestern Iowa out into southern portions of Minnesota. This is right out ahead of the triple point, and these are the kind of thunderstorms that you kind of become concerned about, because these become supercellular. They're these discrete thunderstorms. And then notice as we head on into what would be 8 o'clock central time, we've got one lone, just large, discrete thunderstorm heading out across northern portions of Iowa at this point. And you can see the updraft helicity track. And then we've got some additional discrete thunderstorms out across western Iowa and eastern portions of Nebraska. You've also got thunderstorms now forming, if you look way down here, down towards Dallas, that have developed. So it's going to be later on this evening, but this environment is going to be absolutely primed for all facets of severe weather today. Large hail, damaging winds, tornadoes, probably a strong tornado or two, especially up into the Iowa area. If we were to take a look at this and do like a point and click sounding out ahead of this, and take a look at some of the information from the sounding, you can see if you look over, this is what we call a hodograph. Basically, it's a wind profile of the environment as you go from the surface up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers. And as if you start to see this profile where it's kind of looping like this, so basically it's not only increasing with increasing wind speeds with height, but you're also increasing turning with height. This is a very classic, and you can see where it says possible hazard type here. This is a very classic hodograph, a looping hodograph for tornadoes. And we're seeing that be very common this afternoon. In fact, one of my favorite maps here, and I think a lot of people's favorite maps now, are these hodograph maps. And we can extend this out here, and you can see kind of plot several hodographs across the region. And if you look out here into Iowa, and even extending down into Kansas and down into Oklahoma somewhat, while Iowa's are much more impressive, you can see how we've got these very long looping hodographs out across portions of Iowa out ahead of that triple point. So we've got very strong winds, and we've got a lot of turning with height as well, which is also crucial. So, you look at that and you kind of look at where we're headed with like these, 1 or 2 individual supercells that get out here ahead of the main line. And they're just going to be in an environment that's extremely favorable for all facets of severe weather, including tornadoes this afternoon. If we go back to the Storm Prediction Center, one thing I was looking at earlier, if we go to the composite, this is the significant tornado parameter, the STP parameter, and you can see we got a 3 to 4 out here across Missouri and Kansas. But if we kind of take this out a little bit further and we go into the next 2 hours and then extend this into the next 4 hours and then go into the next 6 hours, notice the STP. I mean, you've got STP forecast values here going up to anywhere between a 10 and a 12 in about that same location where you're forecast to have a 1 or 2 kind of rogue or discrete supercells forming ahead of the main dry line. So that's definitely a concern when you start to see those kind of values in the STP, and you start to see thunderstorms, discrete thunderstorms potentially moving through or near those values today. So if you're out into Iowa, definitely, especially northern, northwestern Iowa where that moderate risk area is located, you definitely want to keep a very close watch on things as we work late afternoon and start to get on into the evening hours. So if we go back over, one big thing we'll be watching is how the environment reacts down into here. So if I go a little bit further, we're going to pull, go back from where I was. I'm going to pull up a sounding, and hopefully it'll kind of reflect what I want it to reflect a little bit. So like we were talking about the cap earlier, as you start to work south of Iowa down into Kansas, Oklahoma, there's a warm layer aloft. And if we look at this over here, this is the skew T diagram. And basically this is plotting dew point and air temperature red, dew point temperature green. And if you look here just above the surface, I'm sure it's pretty hard to see for you, but as we work into the evening, this is as we work into 8 o'clock, notice there is still a little bit of a cap. There's the temperatures increase just a bit. We have a thermal inversion there, and so the big question as you work south out of the moderate risk and enhanced risk area becomes, can we overcome that inversion? We'll have a strong jet stream. We'll have a very sharp dry line. In fact, if we take a look here, you can take a look at this dry line. This is going to be really impressive this afternoon. It already is impressive, but as we work into the afternoon, into the evening, you can see that dry line really tightening up down here. So we may have enough forcing along the dry line and enough heating and enough of a jet stream that we kind of overcome, at least in some locations, that inversion or that cap, and we start to see thunderstorms breaking through it. So that's kind of what we're looking at here for today. So let's go ahead and let's shift on over as we get into tomorrow. And I think I'm gonna leave it here for tomorrow. I've got to shift over and go back to a couple different things here that I want to show you. So give me just a second and we'll kind of talk about tomorrow more. Oh, let's see. All right. So I think we're getting there. Really don't need this anymore. All right. So I'm going to go back to the SPC. So here's tomorrow's outlook. If you missed it, there's the moderate risk out across southwestern Indiana, southern Illinois, down across the Mississippi River Valley. And that is for primarily damaging winds. Now, with that being said, down into portions of Arkansas, Mississippi, northeastern Louisiana, you guys do have a 15% risk of tornadoes. And then their 10% risk extends all the way up into southwestern and western Indiana and into kind of central and southern Illinois. The possibility for some of those tornadoes in the 10 and 15% risk area being significant does exist. The thing, we'll talk about this in a bit. I just wanted to show you kind of the risk once again. So let's go on over and let's take a look. This is the 12Z HRRR, and I chose this because it goes out through the event here. And we had to go back and another hour and a half, we'll have the 18Z. But so here's the system today. There's your thunderstorms out there we were talking about earlier into Iowa, southern portions of Minnesota. But then as we work on into tonight, you can see there's this big line of thunderstorms coming across Iowa down into Missouri and southeastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas. This continues, kind of fizzles out overnight. One thing we're going to be watching here tonight, and I'm going to switch over to 500 millibar map. As you work into the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning, notice what I want you to notice. So this is 500 millibars, and this is something I talked about a little bit on some of our social media platforms earlier on in the week. Is this little disturbance coming through at 500 millibars, this little trough, shortwave trough coming through as we work tonight into tomorrow morning out across the Ohio Valley. When you start to see that, when you get these troughs coming through and you're already seeing, kind of a warm, unstable environment, which we will to some extent have tonight, you're going to start to generate some showers and thunderstorms. And how those kind of play out tonight into tomorrow is going to be really, really important, because if those showers and thunderstorms continue tomorrow morning on into the afternoon, especially early mid-afternoon time frame through 2-3 o'clock, we've got a lot of rainfall, we've got a lot of cloud cover. Your severe weather threat is going to wane pretty quickly, because you're not going to get the instability, especially your higher end potential of a severe weather threat. Now, if we see rainfall come in tonight and rainfall lasts maybe even late morning tomorrow, exits out of the area, skies start to clear, and we start to get some sunshine, which means we're going to warm up and we're going to build instability with the warm air at the surface and the cold air aloft, because warm air tends to rise. So if you're cold aloft and warm at the surface, that air is going to want to tend to rise a lot more, and you build in a lot more instability out there if we have more sunshine. So if we clear out tomorrow mid to late morning, or even early into the afternoon before this frontal boundary gets here, before this cold front gets here, that could spell some trouble. So taking a look at the HRRR, so this is the 12Z HRRR from this morning. This is by 13Z tomorrow, which is in Eastern time, is 9 o'clock. You can see there's not a lot out there, but there's showery activity kind of moving up across portions of Illinois and Indiana as we work through the morning on into about noon to 1 o'clock. So we're still dealing with showers and thunderstorms out there, but notice we are seeing additional thunderstorm activity out here towards the cold front that is developing. Now, if you kind of notice a lot, we're starting to see a little bit of drier weather down here into southern portions of Illinois, and also down into into the Mississippi Valley. In fact, I'm going to totally switch the view here so you can see this a bit better. As we work into tomorrow, notice, tomorrow afternoon, once you get into southern Illinois and down across the Mississippi River Valley, there's not a whole lot of convection. It's all up into the Ohio Valley, which is, something, as storm chasing that, I've been storm chasing since I was 17 years old. And this is always the case. We start, it seems like, I shouldn't say always, but 99% of the time, it seems like across the Ohio Valley in the Midwest, if we're talking about a high end potential for severe weather, we're always talking about the morning convection or the morning rainfall and cloud cover, because it plays such a huge role into the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley in the Midwest in determining our overall severe threat. I've seen it where it comes in, it clears out, and you have, major risks of severe weather. And I've seen where it looks like we're going to have major risk of severe weather. It comes in and it essentially almost lingers all day, and you get a little skinny line of maybe some gusty thunderstorms or some low-end severe thunderstorms that come through, and it ends up not being anything. So tomorrow morning into the early afternoon, notice, this is by like 2 to 3 o'clock, still forecasting rain showers and some thunderstorms, likely non-severe, out across Indiana into Ohio. But we're seeing the clearing in southwestern Indiana down into southern Illinois, which I'm sure kind of lended some confidence to the Storm Prediction Center to go moderate there. But notice as we work, and if I back this up 1 hour, a couple hours really, as we work into noon, 1 o'clock, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, we do start to see these cells out across Illinois really getting going. Could initially be more discreet as they get into this environment and they develop, but I think, if they're along that frontal boundary, they're going to want to tend to go linear pretty rapidly. And what I mean by linear is forming into kind of this line-looking segment, a QLCS, a quasi-linear convective system, pretty quickly tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And then as we continue the work on into 5, 6, 7 o'clock, you can see this powerful line of thunderstorms marching across Illinois into Indiana. Definitely a damaging wind threat. I mean, that's why the moderate's out there, is the damaging wind threat. Embedded tornadoes and hail also possible. As we work on into 8 o'clock, going into 9 o'clock, I mean, you can see this powerful line of thunderstorms entering into extreme western portions of Ohio, southeastern Indiana, also still extending down into portions of the Mississippi River Valley, down into Arkansas, Tennessee, down into Mississippi, where they will start more discreet probably down there as well. And then as we work into the evening, these will probably start to kind of fizzle out as we get towards like 9, 10, 11 o'clock, maybe seeing some damaging winds out into, like Columbus, Ohio, westward. Tomorrow evening, depending on the environment. Now, if we were to go on over and take a look, a couple things I'll show you just to compare here. If I can, I think this has it. There we go. A couple things I'll show you to compare just how models are right now. If we take a look at the CAPE values tomorrow, this is tomorrow afternoon, so this is like 5 o'clock. Notice a lot of your ML CAPE. A lot of your CAPE here is down here into very southwestern Indiana, southern Illinois. Very weak CAPE up here north of that location. So this is telling me, okay, we've got convection going on. We can't get any kind of CAPE much further out of the very southern portions of the Ohio Valley. If I were to switch over and go to the NAM 12 kilometer, as we work on into tomorrow afternoon, notice how much further north and even how much stronger the CAPE is out across portions of central Illinois and western Indiana. I mean, you're talking about, instead of having 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram, you've got 2,000 to 3,000, which seems a little excessive to me. But if the NAM tries to clear things out a little bit more tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening, it allows for more sunshine, it allows for more instability, which would be much more conducive for a more higher end threat, and also probably more conducive for the potential for some tornadic activity if we start to see a little bit more instability. Like I said, the wind shear is going to be there. In fact, if we take a look, we were looking at those photographs earlier and how they're turning. So if I go and kind of progress into today, let me rewind this. You can see how these are really curved out here today. If we go into tomorrow afternoon and look at the NAM, you can see as we work into tomorrow afternoon, we've also got this curvature. And while it's not as pretty as what we're seeing today, you can also see how these are curved and turning with height tomorrow as well. So we've definitely got the wind shear. We'll definitely have the wind shear tomorrow across the environment to produce, or across the region to produce tornadoes. It's all going to be, as we've been talking about, what we call a conditional severe threat, meaning that it's going to rely on the morning convection. So I know I keep reiterating that, but it is going to be a crucial part of how things go tomorrow, and it's something we probably really won't know. We'll start to get a little better idea, I think, this evening as more data comes in, especially towards 0Z, towards 8, 9 o'clock this evening. But even then, probably we're not going to have our best ideas until we get into tomorrow and see what the environment looks like as the sun starts to come up, and see what satellite looks like and how things are reacting with that wave coming through late tonight, tomorrow morning. But nonetheless, you should definitely, if you're across the Ohio Valley tomorrow, down into the Mississippi Valley, you should be keeping an eye on things, because there is the possibility of a more significant and impactful severe weather outbreak or event. And the same story if you're out into portions of Iowa, all the way down into Missouri, portions of Missouri, Missouri, Kansas, out into southern Minnesota, eastern portions of Nebraska, and then down across eastern plains and down into like the Ozarks as well. it's a little bit more dependent on the cap down into portions of the southern plains. But definitely, if you're out across northern portions of Iowa, keep a close eye out, because I do think there's going to be one or two cells here this afternoon, as the data has continued to show that we'll probably have a pretty good potential. I shouldn't say afternoon, but late afternoon into the evening, that we'll have a pretty good potential of producing large long track tornadoes. So that's all I have for you here today. Everybody, thanks for logging on to the live stream. If we have some time tomorrow, we're going to try to do another one. It's going to really depend on how things look tomorrow and kind of initiation time, that kind of thing. But hopefully we can fit one in at some point tomorrow. Everybody, thanks for logging on. Have a great Tuesday.